Hello and welcome to the Agile Innovation Leaders podcast. I'm Ola Ojako. On this podcast, I speak with world-class leaders and doers about themselves and a variety of topics spanning agile, lean innovation, business, leadership, and much more, with actionable takeaways for you, the listener. So I have with me here Fabiola Eyholzer. She is the co-founder and CEO of Just Leading Solutions, a New York-based consultancy for lean agile people operations. Fabiola, it's a massive honor and pleasure to have you on this show. Thank you for being my guest on the Agile Innovation Leaders podcast.
Thank you, Ulla. The pleasure is all mine.
Yeah. So how did you get into this, lean agile space?
So it's actually quite an interesting story. It's now 13 years ago when I was running the Swiss market for a European HR consultancy. And we were looking for a new leadership model for our career starters. And I met some agile coaches and they're like, oh, you have to do Scrum. I'm like, well, did you hear me say that we are an HR consultancy? We're not a software developer. She's like, trust me, it's the right thing to do. So we did a test run. So we introduced Scrum, which is the predominant agile practice, with our career starters. And it was such an eye-opener to see what actually happens when we work in this new way, that I knew this is the future. And I decided there and then to quit my job and dedicate the next phase of my career to Agile HR.
Wow. And since then, what sorts of organizations or projects or initiatives have you worked on?
So we've worked on so many different initiatives and with so many different companies. I actually had to look it up. I was in over 21 countries with the topic of HR agility. And in that time, I worked with companies across all industries, across all sectors, from profit to non-profit to education. And something that is really interesting is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much what your corporate culture is, what your social culture is. When it comes to the people function, we want to make sure, how do we maximize the people function? How do we leverage what we're doing in HR in a way that is highly beneficial for our employees, and with that, highly beneficial for our organizations? And of course, right now, we are in that situation that the world of work around us is changing massively. It's just being turned upside down. And this is, on the one hand, really scary. On the other hand, it's a massive chance to really reinvent HR and really do things differently.
Something that stands out to me is you're saying it's an opportunity to reinvent HR, and we will get back to that. But before we do, what does business agility mean to you?
So for me, business agility is really ensuring that our companies are engaging and adaptive and innovative so that they can thrive in that fast-paced and constantly changing, highly dynamic environment. And at the core, what it means is that organizations and institutions are shifting away from being well-oiled machine to being thriving ecosystems. Because adaptability means exploring change, enabling change, and being able to be change ready and to manage change, to flex their muscles, to explore opportunities very quickly, to act on opportunities and not be scared, not be afraid to pivot and to course correct. And that's what we are seeing right now. The companies have to shift away from a model that served us really well for 150 years to a new system that is always at the edge of chaos, but that's the only way to continue to thrive and be adaptive in that fast-paced, highly dynamic environment.
And would you say, this is the first time I'm hearing that phrase, edge of chaos, but I do agree. And would you say that in this day and age, because the nature of the work we do compared to 150 years ago, or even some years ago, it's, for the most part, getting to be knowledge-based, especially in technology. Is that one of the considerations for the change we need in the way we organize and run our companies or groups or teams?
Yes, technology is definitely a massive game changer for us, but it's not just about changing the way we work or changing the way our processes work. And quite often when we talk about technology in the HR space, people think about, putting our HR process onto a new, fancier digital process. But that's not just what it's about. It's more about understanding how much is technology and everything else that goes hand in hand with that? How is it changing the way that we work? And it leaves us with that very fundamental question. What type of work is left for us humans? If everything around us is being automated, and when we think about automation, a lot of people think about assembly line work going away, routine work going away. And that was true 20 years ago. But today, work is being automated in every single field imaginable. And it's not just routine work that is being automated. And that leaves us with that question, what type of work is left for us? The answer is it's the type of work that requires our passion, our potential for collaboration, ideation, our social and emotional intelligence. And of course, we are solving problems we never had to solve before. So there is no script. And that means we need to organize our companies in a different way. We need to organize work in a different way so that we can manage that ongoing fast-paced change and that we can continue to solve problems we haven't solved before. And that's why we need to shift away from being a well-oiled machine that has everything already figured out and written into job descriptions and competency models and objectives and KPIs to a company that can create and respond to change very quickly.
So given your definition of what business agility means to you and the case you've made for change, in the sense that we're at the edge of chaos and the sorts of work we need to do right now, because technology, almost everything can be and will be automated in one way or the other. So where does HR fit into this in the light of business agility?
Yes, and I can give you a very straightforward, simple answer. The role of HR in business agility is that HR is the secret to business agility. Because if we don't align our people approach, and if we don't align our HR practices to the new realities and new demands, we're not going to be successful. So if we don't engage in talent scouting and talent enablement and performance acceleration in a way that is aligned with the new way of working, we cannot achieve business agility.
And how ready would you say the HR function is for this sort of transformation?
So the companies that we work with, or that I have the pleasure of working with, they are ready, or at least they are not scared to try. Okay. So they're courageous enough to try. As an industry in human resources, I think we have a long way to go. On the one hand, we see that things are changing and we're trying super hard to change with the times. But quite often we don't have that fundamental understanding that the entire mindset, the entire DNA of the organization is going to change. And unless we understand that new mindset, that new DNA, we will not be able to change or maximize the people function in a way that is most beneficial for agile enterprises. So we have a long way to go.
How would you know if an organization's HR function is ready? Are there some indicators that they're ready to go on this journey if they haven't started already?
One of the indicators is if they have more questions than answers, they're probably there. So because the companies who just say, oh, we've done this, we've done that, tick, 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 they're probably not the ones with that growth mindset that agile organizations need. Okay, so that's one indicator. The other indicator is that they're not satisfied with the status quo. And at the same time, they are willing to do something about it. So I sometimes say we have a gut feeling that tells us there must be a better way out there to engage with people, to create a learning organization, to inspire people. And if we listen to that gut feeling, then we need to be gutsy about it, to change it, to do something about it. And these are some of the things that we see in organizations that we work with. They are not afraid to challenge the status quo. They realize we need to change, and we need to change now.
When they have identified, yes, we need to change now, what's your typical direction or steer or guidance to these organizations and their leaders in terms of where to start? Would you say, let's take a big bang approach and overhaul everything, or would it be small iterative steps towards the change? And what's your typical approach? How would you advise them?
So I'm going to give you the consultant answer. It depends.
It depends.
So it depends on the change readiness and change willingness of the company. We have a lot of companies where we have amazing success when we took one part of the organization, typically around 500 to 2,500 people, where we changed the entire HR approach. We had some companies where we have had amazing success with a big bang, where we really transformed the entire HR organization. But it really depends on how ready are you to explore, and also how willing are you? How much do you want to put in? How much energy and passion and resources are you willing to put into that transformation? But one thing that we always do is we start with training and inspiring people, because we talk about a new world of work. And why this is easy to say, people initially envision this is about virtual work or working from home. Well, that's a tiny part of what we're talking about when it comes to this new world of work. And because this new world of work is rooted in such a fundamentally different mindset, we first need to understand that mindset, and we need to speak the same language. Because quite often we're using words that have a very different meaning in the agile space versus the traditional corporate environment. And I can give you an example. For instance, if we talk about hiring for potential, what are we looking for? In the traditional way of looking at potential, it's, does someone have the potential to thrive in that particular role? And does someone have the potential to take the next step in a predefined career trajectory? But that's not what we're talking about when we talk about hiring for potential in the agile space. We are talking about hiring for potential to thrive in an uncertain, complex, ambiguous, volatile work. Can someone feel comfortable with uncertainty, not knowing what their job is going to look like 12 months from now? Does someone feel comfortable with flexing their muscles, with learning and unlearning new things? So it's a very different understanding of a simple word, hiring for potential. So that's what we are doing, is speaking that new language, understanding why and how this new world is so fundamentally different.
Well, that's very, very thought-provoking. And some of the things in my little experience that I would expect leaders of such organizations to say, like, yes, well and good, you inspire us, there's a case for change, but how can we make sure this isn't one of those multiple failed large change initiatives we've engaged in? How would we know we will make this sustainable?
So you will never have a guarantee, but what is a massive game changer and what's crucial to the success of any transformation is your commitment. Okay, so you have to stick with it, even or especially when the going gets tough. And since we are working in such a different way, it's super easy to fall back into old patterns of behavior when there are problems that come up, when we need to reprioritize, when something unforeseen happens. It's super easy to fall back. And that's when you have to keep going. And I think that dedication is one of the key aspects. And also what's interesting about agility is when you learn about Agile and how it works and what the values are, it resonates with us. Of course it does, because it was created for the human economy. So it taps into what we bring to the table. So it sounds super easy and straightforward. Let's talk about empowering people. Who doesn't want to feel empowered? But then we have to figure out, what does that mean for us in an organization? What does empowerment mean? How do we share that empowerment? How do we allow the teams to explore, to learn, to stumble, to fail, to course correct? It's not always that easy to then actually follow through. And I always say the devil is in the detail when it comes to Agile. It sounds super easy on the surface, but when you dig in deeper, it gets more challenging.
It's almost like learning to play a game of chess. Yes, you might know how the different pieces move on the board, but actually getting into it, it's a lifelong pursuit to become a grandmaster, almost. Anyway, I really enjoyed going through your course, the Agile HR Explorer course. That's on the Skilled Agile platform, open to SBCs. But there was something that you mentioned in that course, Agile HR versus agility in HR. Can you explain, for the benefit of the audience, what these two terms mean and how they differ?
Yes, so the word HR has two meanings. So when people talk about HR, they can either mean the HR department. So your compensation specialist, your learning expert, your grading instructor. So all these HR professions. So the entire HR department, or they can mean HR as a discipline, as a function, where we talk about talent acquisition and performance management and learning and development, workforce planning, and so on. And because there is that duality to it, we also have a different approach to agility. And that's when you hear those words, Agile for HR. So meaning, what can Agile do for the HR department? Or HR for Agile, meaning, what does HR do for the Agile teams, for the Agile organization? And the approach is slightly different. So when we bring Agile to the HR department, it's all about how do we work in a different way? How do we organize around value? How do we deliver value faster in a better way? So it's implementing all these Agile practices, the Agile practices and ceremonies and artifacts within the HR department. Whereas the other side is really, how do we align all our HR practices to this new way of working? And that's really where the magic happens. So if we shift from recruiting to talent scouting, if we shift from learning and development to talent enablement, if we shift from performance management to performance acceleration, that's when we help the organization become and stay agile. That's when we bring business or enable business agility across the organization.
And there's something you said about workforce planning, so in terms of the function. If I may just go slightly off tangent, it's a question that's been on my mind, in the sense that, is there a way that one could approach workforce planning that would undermine the agility of the organization? So I'm going to give a hypothetical example. So there are some organizations who might be saying, do you know what, in this economy, we need to balance out our talent mix, and we want new fresh talent who maybe fresh graduates who they will cost cheaper. They probably are up to date with, new technologies versus, existing talent who might be more expensive. So is there a way that one might approach workforce planning that could be detrimental? Because there are pros and cons to every approach potentially, but in your experience in the multiple organizations you've supported and continue to support, could there be things we could watch out for that might undermine our agility in that space?
Yes. So the way that we look at it is when we look at talent and what talent brings to the table, we don't look at it from, is this talent expensive or cheap? It's about how much value does this talent add to the organization? Okay. So it's a value-based way of looking at it rather than a cost-based. Right. So that's the first part. The other part is that what we want to do with adaptive workforce planning is that we can explore opportunities very quickly. So it has to be a way where it's easy for us to say, hey, we have new initiatives come up that require new skills, that we are very proactive about it. That let's say we need more AI experience or blockchain experience or whatever it is in the future. If we know that today that there is a high chance that we need it, let's look at the organization. Do we already have people who have experience or skills in that particular field? Can they train others? Do we have to start putting up a training program ourselves? Do we have to get external talent in that can give us a leg up? Can we work with exploratory assignments to get people that experience? So there's so many things that we can do. And the focus with anything that we do in agility is always about now and the future. Whereas in the traditional workforce planning, it's more about the past and today. And if you think about it, workforce planners, they don't have a full overview of what are the initiatives the teams are going to be working on 6 months from now, what we think is going to be 12 months from now. And that's what we do with adaptive workforce planning in the Agile space. We have that forward-looking approach. We look at our talent pool and say, what's the strength of our talent pool? Not just compared to the initiatives that we're doing today, but to the initiatives that we think are coming up. And the beauty about this is, and here you see that we're really applying systems thinking, is that this is then opening up growth opportunities for our employees. Because if we want to be an agile organization, we need to be a learning organization first.
I do like what you're saying about the adaptive workforce planning, and it does align with that, responding to change over just sticking to a plan. How often would you recommend, or how often in your view would it be practical to be having these sorts of workforce planning sessions?
We do it once a quarter with our clients. So because that allows you to then also collaborate, because this is about talent management, where do we see things that people need to learn, what they want to focus on? Do we need to open up exploratory assignments? Do we need to assign people to different teams? All of these things we need to know before we go into our quarterly planning. So if we talk in safe terminologies, you want that to happen before your PI planning, so that you can make sure that those people topics are part of the backlog. So we work with capacity allocation, all of that, to make sure that we have people topics on that backlog. So that's why we do it once a quarter.
Okay. And I would assume, once a quarter, those people topics, because there's also the respect for the individual or the people involved, there would be some factoring in that there will be conversations with the individuals to say, hey, this is what we think is going to happen. What's your opinion? Do you want to go? Instead of just shifting them into positions and maybe then learning on the day of the PI planning, your team has changed.
Yes. And, in the Agile space, we talk a good game about empowerment, and we know how it works when it comes to work. But of course, empowerment also means empowering people when it comes to their learning and growth journey. So, the people manager, people developer, and HR are there to open up opportunities for them. But at the end of the day, they have to be on that journey, right? They have to make those steps. They have to go through that door. They have to go out and learn and explore and bring themselves into play. So it's also empowerment when it comes to their own growth and learning.
Thanks for that, Fabiola. Would you say that when you do this adaptive workforce planning, does it make sense for one area or team or division or department to be compared with another. And I'll tie it back. I'll just give you some context because I've heard of organizations, doing it based on, oh, we want to make sure our cost base is, our overheads, we're cutting it. I know everyone is doing a good job, but we want to cut it. And we start measuring this department with that department in terms of workforce planning. I do resonate with that value base. Instead of looking at how much they cost, what's the value these people, these talents are bringing? What's your view on, in the process of doing this, comparing one unit or department with another in their workforce planning approach?
So there are two aspects to it. One is, what data do we measure? And the second part is, what do we do with the data? So, for instance, when it comes to adaptive workforce planning, for instance, one of the important KPIs that we have is looking at the talent pool strength. So how strong is the talent pool compared to what we're working on right now, what we're going to work on in the next 1 or 2 quarters, and 3 to 4 quarters out. But we're measuring that just so that we have a data point to get us talking. So this is not about comparing my team to your team and my team is better than your team. That's not what this is about. It's more about having a data point that allows us to have a conversation, that allows us to see, are we moving into the right direction? So, and I think that's important to all the KPIs. Why are we measuring them? And what are we doing with the data? And also the question, are we measuring the right things? And something that we often see is that people don't differentiate between leading and lagging indicators. So, for instance, a simple example in HR, we often look at retention rates, which is a great measure to have. But here's the thing, a retention rate is a lagging indicator. A lot of stuff has already happened. And people did that quiet quitting probably long before they actually handed in their notice. So while we want to have that data point, there are other data points that are probably going to be better for us to be proactive to do things about it. So always think about, why are we measuring something? Are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring the things that are easy to measure? And for instance, cost is a data point that is easy to measure, but it doesn't say anything about the value. Yeah. If someone used 100% of their budget, well, did they do well? We don't know. Maybe they could have done the same thing with 70% of the budget, or maybe they should have gone to 120 and created something amazing for the future. So really think about, why are we measuring things and what are we doing with the data?
Yes. It just reminds me of a conversation I had, and I said, what if we don't look at the cost, and what if we also asked, are they meeting the targets that you set for them, the objectives that you set for them? And could they be setting up your organization to make, quantum leaps of progress by the work they're doing right now? So, some of these things we can't see into the future. It's only retrospective, and that's where the leading indicators you talked about, although you talked about it differently from, attrition, measuring attrition and people leaving and retention and all that. But there are ways of knowing in advance whether our guess is most likely to be correct. And sometimes measuring money or the costs isn't always the best metric. So I really like what you said about that. Thank you.
And also, when you think about it, so many organizations, they want to be innovative and adaptive. At the same time, they focus so much on efficiency and, following a script, following a plan, hitting certain numbers that are set in stone, that they actually lose agility and adaptability and innovation. But they don't see the connection between the two. They don't see the connection between their leadership approach and their HR and finance and legal processes, and how that is impacting, one way or another, how innovative they are, how creative they are.
I do recognize we're kind of teetering. Whenever we talk about the cost, we're teetering between, finance, but they are all intertwined, like you just pointed out. It's all intertwined, and it's a delicate ecosystem where you're always going to have to be doing something to stay in balance. What you did yesterday might not necessarily work today. So it's all about sensing and responding. And I do appreciate what you've said so far. But what led to your developing the Agile HR course, which is now on the Scaled Agile platform?
Yes, I co-created or co-founded JLS, I think 9 years ago. And we very early on realized that we need to have a training to sort of do that level setting, get people that foundational knowledge to succeed in their transformation efforts. And that's when we created a series of different courses. And one of them is the Explore course that you mentioned. It's a one-day course. It's great for anyone who's new or fairly new to Agile HR, someone who wants to know more about it. And this is really an important first step to a longer learning and growth journey. But if you're new to Agile and you're in HR, this is definitely a great training. It's a one-day training that starts out with the new world of work. Why is it so different? Why do we have so much pressure on performance management and career models and so on and so forth? Then what is Agile? And we explain Agile not using technology-based examples, but HR examples. What does good design mean in the HR space? So we really explain the Agile Manifesto and Agile values and principles from an HR perspective. And then we bring these worlds together and we talk about what is Agile HR, how do we apply that to different HR practices. So it's going to give you a well-rounded introduction to the field of HR agility.
And is this available on the JLS website?
Yes, so all our trainings are available on our website, and also our partner companies offer Agile HR training. You can go to an open enrollment class, or you can bring it to your own organization to train either an entire department or a team. And it's especially valuable when you start out on a new initiative. It doesn't matter whether your company is already Agile or planning to become more Agile. If you're tasked with reinventing performance management or, doing a new initiative, a new project, this is always a good way to get into it and say, okay, how can we make Agile work for us before we then help the organization be more Agile?
We'll definitely have the link to your website in the show notes with your episode. So what I'm hearing is it's available. There are some partners as well that offer this training, which you and your team have curated. But if someone says, no, I want you, Fabiola, to come to do this for us, is that possible as well?
Absolutely. You can either go to our website and contact me, or you can hunt me down on LinkedIn. I'm the only one with my name, so you should be able to find me and just send me a message and we can definitely collaborate.
Okay. Well, what excites you about what you do currently?
I tell people I have the best job in the world because I get to work with amazing people, amazing companies, people and companies who are not afraid to push the status quo, who are courageous to do things differently and who are not afraid to push boundaries, because we're getting into uncharted territory. When you think about human resources, the term HR was first used in 1893 by J.R. Cobbins. So HR is this year 120 years old. And of course, we've evolved. We changed from personnel management to modern HR and everything, but we're at the cusp of a new era that is going to be fundamentally different from anything else that we've done in the past. And if you think about it, it's never been this exciting to be in HR. We get to reinvent and shape the future of HR, or the people function, whether you call it talent and culture, or employee success, or people and culture, whatever term you're using. we are reinventing it, and I'm in the middle of it. So I get to help organizations do this.
That's exciting. I can sense the passion and the enthusiasm there. Would you be writing a book on this topic anytime soon?
Maybe one day.
Maybe. Okay. Whilst we will be eagerly waiting for your book, what books would you recommend to people who might be wondering, okay, what else could I read to get abreast on this? Or generally, any books that you would recommend that have made an impact or impression on you?
So one book that had a really big impact on me was The Connected Company. So it talks about the company being more like a city rather than an engine. And even though it doesn't talk about agility, it doesn't talk about human resources, there is so much food for thought in there. You just have to put that thought in to make that translation into HR. But I thought that was a fantastic book. Then obviously Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. I'm a systems thinker myself, so that definitely resonated a lot. And of course, there are other books like The Culture Code, The Fearless Organization, books like that can, really give you a lot of food for thought.
Thank you very much. These would be in the show notes. And would there be any ask before we round up that you would have for the audience?
So don't be afraid to push boundaries and to challenge the status quo. As I said earlier, every time you have that gut feeling there is a better way out there, well, chances is that there actually is. So don't be afraid to push boundaries. Don't be afraid to try. And I know everyone sometimes feels that they're not hamster wheel, that they have so many things to do already that they can't take on something else. But I tell you from personal experience and from my experience working in that field for 10 years, it is a game changer. And if you're willing to put in the work, the results are going to be amazing. Yes, actually it's hard work, but it really delivers what it promises. So don't be scared, be courageous, do it.
Thank you very much, Fabiola, for those words of wisdom. It's been a pleasure. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we'll have some follow-up sometime in future. Many thanks, Fabiola.
Anytime. Thank you so much. Pleasure was all mine.
That's all we have for now. Thanks for listening. If you like this show, do subscribe at www.agileinnovationleaders.com. That's agileinnovationleaders.com, or your favorite podcast provider. Also share with friends and do leave a review on iTunes. This would help others find this show. I'd also love to hear from you, so please drop me an email at ola@agileinnovationleaders.com. Take care and God bless.